how do we handle serving Christ in a culture that definitely does
Hates
not?
God.
Yes. Today we're starting the book of Daniel, and I think that is one of the core concepts in the book of Daniel. There's several things going on in Daniel. We'll get into all of them, hopefully. I like this book, so if I had to pick between Daniel and Ezekiel, it'd be very easy for me to choose.
It's also very short, which I did not realize. I was like pleasantly surprised, but also like, shoot, there's a lot jammed into these 7-ish
Yeah, I was just going to
chapters.
say, it is relatively short, but there is a lot jammed in here.
Now, why couldn't it be the opposite? Why couldn't Ezekiel be 7 chapters long with like a lot jammed into one? And then
more to say. So to set this in context before we really start to dig in here, Daniel is part of the exile. Daniel was taken from Judah to Babylon. That's actually spelled out in the opening chapters. So this is back pre-586. This is before Jerusalem is destroyed. So we have been hopping around a little bit. But Daniel is an important figure. His friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I'm not sure why we know Daniel by his Hebrew name and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego by their Babylonian names, but that's just how it goes.
it's catchier.
They are part of this exilic group, and they are looking forward to being restored. So they are aware of the prophets. They are reading the letters. They are, with anticipation, looking forward to when God will restore his people. They're not reading it like us, just knowing what happened. They're reading it with anticipation, hoping for an end to this time in Babylon. But like I said at the beginning, one of the key themes of this book is how to serve God well when literally nobody is.
Kind of like island faith. What is interesting and what stuck out to me was that these guys are, I guess they are like the righteous few. So like, in my opinion, they would seem to be like the goody two-shoes that are like, man, all you guys suck because I trust God and we're here because of all of you. But it's interesting. This takes me back to like Joseph times, where Joseph is like, he is hardcore sold out for God and he trusts God even when he's thrown into the pit. So, and like to the point where he's called out because he knows how to like, or he's given the ability, I guess, to be able to interpret the dreams of
Nebuchadnezzar.
Joseph.
Oh, the Pharaoh.
The Pharaoh, yes, thank you. So again, being like one of very few people that actually trust God, and God is like, you know what? I know that you trust me, and I'm going to give you a huge responsibility that's going to end up leading my people to places they never thought they would go. And I see that same kind of like storyline happening with these men and their willingness to trust and follow God in these crazy dark places like Babylon, to the point where they're coming alongside and like basically telling Nebuchadnezzar what his dreams mean because the other guys just couldn't do it. I think that's so crazy. There's so many instances of that. I think it's really cool that this is playing out very similarly.
These guys make no concessions. They literally refuse to water down their faith. That is one of the things that sticks out to me. I remember in college we talked about culture making. And culture making is this idea of how much culture can Christians be involved in to influence it.
I remember that one.
So how much do we influence culture? How much do we adopt culture so that we can change it? If you applied that conversation, that thought to the book of Daniel would say none. And what's interesting is to do that, Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would have had to have been putting all their faith in God. Like, okay, God, we're going to serve you. Remember, they were reading the prophets. So they're saying, okay, this is your message. We will serve you. We will serve only you. You're going to have to come through for us. And so they're picking fights over relatively small details. Like they won't eat meat.
I was going to say they have, I'd heard it recently said this way, where you can't have one foot in one camp and one foot in the other and expect God to just be like, oh yeah, I see that you're like halfway giving me your life, your heart, your everything. So like, it's the same for these guys. Like There is no like, well, I'm going to give my life to you here, but I'm going to like just kind of like not make sacrifices as much in my little evil dark place over here. They're like fully sold out.
That gets my head spinning because I think recent Christian history, at least in the United States, is like a lot of like, let's get 1 foot here and 1 foot there as much as possible.
Because there's always gray areas and always things that you're willing to just be like, well, that's okay. We'll just let that slide.
So there was this like church growth movement that was like, okay, like let's just make it as accessible as possible. So like that weird stuff, don't talk about that anymore. Let's water that down a little bit. Let's make this more attractional. And I think the people that were doing it had good hearts, and I think they were really excited about growing the kingdom. What's interesting is whenever we decide to make growing the kingdom our thing, we make it less good.
We make it less good. And also, again, I heard it said this way, like very recently, that like when you allow yourself to do that, you're like putting your idea of who God is, like you're putting your version of God in place of who God is. And ultimately, like you are dabbling in people's eternities. Like, why are we watering down something that is so clear and so black and white because it seems better or seems like more attractive when it's like, hey, that's someone's eternity that you're just dabbling in to make it feel less like, I mean, judgment is a real thing. We can't just like shy away from it. Like, nope, this will happen. We need to have both feet in and not straddling the other.
So you see their reluctance to compromise. You also see their excitement to seek God. You will see over and over and over again where Daniel is seeking God. It's like, hey, this is bad. We're going to God with this.
Yeah.
And God comes through. And they go up to the very edge of disaster many times. We're going to see in chapter 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thrown into a furnace. It's like when Jonah got thrown out of the boat. He did not expect to get swallowed by a whale. When these guys got thrown in the furnace, they did not expect to survive the furnace. And yet they do.
And you know what's interesting? I'm sure that there was definitely some kind of fear. I can't imagine that, like, you know, I have the VeggieTales version in my mind always. But it's like, I'm sure there was actual human frailty, fear. Like, you don't want to die, but you know that you're not going to just, like, you've come this far. You're not going to be like, well, I'm just going to sabotage my faith now.
We are serving the Lord with zero compromise. We will do what he says. We will be obedient to his call. We will understand his word and what he wants, and we will do it.
Well, and what was really interesting to me was, and I think I've read this before. I've heard this story so many times. But in chapter 3, when Nebuchadnezzar is like telling them he's telling his men to throw them into the fire. It says in verse 22, the king's order was urgent and the furnace was overheated. The flame of the fire killed those men who took them into the furnace. So this is not just like some, coincidental, oh, they just didn't get burned up or whatever. So much so that the men who were supposed to get rid of them died.
Dead.
Like, oh, that's so crazy. And these are the kinds of moments where you can't explain anything beyond it, that like, and that's what Nebuchadnezzar says too. There's no way that this could have happened. Like, your God is the most high God. Like, if anybody says anything against them, they're going to be put to death, which is so incredible because I was talking to you earlier. These 3 men, Daniel as well, for some reason, he's just like missed this bullet.
He was off balancing the books or working on taxes or something.
So these 3 men are essentially like missionaries, not only to Nebuchadnezzar, this king of this far off land that has taken all of their people into exile. He is a missionary to not only him, but also to their own people, because these people, yes, they're exiled, but they're still ordered to worship this golden image that Nebuchadnezzar has set up. No matter their language, everyone is required. And that language part is important because I'm assuming there's like some kind of language barrier for them.
That means it's Babylonians, but also all these people who have been brought enslaved, from all these other nations.
So I'm assuming as if they were lost before they came in, they are equally lost as slaves in Babylon. So they are also missionaries to these people who are enslaved that like, hey, we believe in God. You're ordered to also believe in God and follow what he says. We're not bowing down to this. Like, we are an example of what all of us should be doing. So it's very interesting that they are essentially like missionaries in this foreign field of people who are so lost and so far from God, including their own.
So here's the takeaway that I want you to have. When we water it down, when we decide to compromise, when we decide to be more attractional, we are putting the ball in our own court instead of God's court. And we are infinitely worse at handling this world and the souls of the people in this world than God is. God is so amazing and so good. God is merciful. He's long-suffering. He's gracious. God will seek his people. So Daniel could not have thought up some creative way to interpret this vision. He had to get it from God.
Right.
Daniel could not have thought up some great workout routine to make him better than the other guys that were eating all these terrible foods sacrificed to idols. It had to be God.
Yeah.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego could not magically save themselves from the furnace. It had to be God. And speaking of it having to be God, there were 4 people in that furnace, not 3. The 4th one was who? It was Jesus. Like this, it is a man that looks like the gods. That's Jesus. There's lots of different opinions on this. My opinion is that is Jesus. Jesus comes through for us when we are uncompromising and we are serving him. And we are seeing actually, like we were kind of taking a break between recording episodes. We are seeing persecution in other nations heating up. And we are seeing uncompromising Christians serving the Lord in the face of a lot of danger. And God is doing incredible things. He's still doing these things today. And he is bringing lots of people to himself. We don't do it. God does.
Yeah.
So what do? We follow him. We love him. We learn about him. We do everything he asks us to do. And when we encounter something terrible, we say, God, we will not compromise. You got to come through on this thing. And sometimes that means diving into the furnace. Like, this doesn't make sense. It seems like this is going to go badly for me. But miracles don't happen if you're compromising and trying to figure out how to negotiate your way out of things. Miracles happen when you trust the Lord and he comes through in a miraculous way. And that's what gets people's attention. And that's what saves souls. So just like you were saying, I love that you said that. They were missionaries to Babylon, but they were missionaries to Israel. Like, think about the fact that there were people from Judah, these guys' friends, families, that were bowing down before this idol. They were so used to bowing down before idols, and they noticed 3 guys that were like, nope, we're not doing that. And they were encouraged by that. And ultimately, those are the seeds that are sown for the people that are going to go back to Jerusalem. They're going to build the temple again. They're going to be part of this new movement of God to restore his people. And he's using these faithful guys to do it.
So I think a very good your part for today is to consider your own life, your own faith, where you're at. If you have one foot in what God is doing and what God is up to, but you're also like pretty comfortable with leaving another foot somewhere else in whatever that secret sin is, or those things that you know are not reflecting the Lord, if you're willing to bow down to other things that are taking you from God and his plan for your life and ultimately his like place in your life, you need to remove that foot and get it, both of them, in line with God and his plan. So really consider your own life. We all have different things that really trip us up, that keep us distracted or keep us bowing down to other things that are not him. So I would suggest to really take a like serious bracing reality check of what those things are that are holding you back or keeping you with one foot in God's plan and one foot in your own plan, and to really sort that out, not only with yourself, but with the Lord and what he has for your life specifically. So thanks for joining us for this first part of Daniel. We'll see you guys back for some more Daniel.
Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplanyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description.
We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.